I married Lisa believing she was my soulmate. For 6 years, we enjoyed a stable though not extraordinary happiness. We were blessed with 3 children, including twins who were the center of our world. Together, we built our life in a peaceful suburban community with well-kept lawns and quiet streets. Those early memories hold a special place in my heart. The tranquility of suburban nights offered a sense of security, like we were sheltered from any real harm. Evenings were filled with laughter echoing through our home, the twins babbling in their cribs, and our eldest child already exploring the living room. Upon my return from work, Lisa's smile would illuminate the hallway. She'd greet me with a warm embrace, perhaps a light-hearted remark about chores or dinner, and everything felt blissful. It was a perfection that seemed unbreakable, and I never anticipated how swiftly it could all fall apart. It all began a year ago with a decision Lisa made without consulting me. That choice shattered our marriage, leaving behind feelings of betrayal, anger, and a burning desire for retribution. And if anyone had told me back then that Lisa's loyalty could be so thin, I would have called them a liar. But the truth is, loyalty can vanish faster than you believe when a person decides their spouse no longer matters. One night she dropped the bomb. Her twin sister Sarah and Sarah's husband, Kevin, wanted a baby. They had struggled for years, and Sarah's doctor recommended surrogacy. Lisa planned to be that surrogate. But the blow that truly shattered me wasn't the idea itself. It was the fact she never bothered to consult me beforehand. She had already begun the process behind my back. I remember the moment clearly, as if etched in my mind. We were sitting together on the couch. Well, physically together, but each lost in our own thoughts. A late-night comedy show flickered on the screen, half forgotten. Lisa glanced at me, phone in hand, and said almost casually, "Grant, there's something I've decided to do." The casual nature of her tone set off alarm bells in my head. Lisa only spoke like that when he made a significant announcement, something she was determined to move forward with regardless of my opinion. A knot formed in my stomach, prompting me to mute the TV. "What's going on? You seem serious," I inquired. She tucked a dark strand of hair behind her ear and calmly stated, "I'm going to be Sarah's surrogate." I blinked in surprise. "What do you mean?" Lisa locked eyes with me, her voice steady. "Sarah is unable to conceive. After failed IVF attempts, the doctors suggested a surrogate. Since Sarah and I share the same DNA, I'm an ideal candidate. I've already initiated the process," she said matter-of-factly, momentarily making me wonder if it was a joke. As I realized she was serious, my heart raced. "You've already?" I started, swallowing hard. "Lisa, are you saying you're carrying Kevin's child?" She exhaled. "It would be both Sarah's and Kevin's child. Genetically, it would be their embryo. I'm simply the carrier." My jaw tensed. "When did you make this decision without informing me?" She lifted her chin. "I anticipated your reaction. I made the decision because Sarah is my twin, and I can't bear to see her unhappy. Kevin and I extensively discussed it, and I am confident in my choice." "You talked about it extensively," I repeated, feeling a surge of anger within me. "That's great, but meanwhile, I'm your husband, and I was the last to know. Do you understand how I feel?" Her eyes reflected frustration. "Grant, I apologize, but this concerns my body. I am going through with this with or without your consent. I had hoped for your support. Yes, I should have informed you earlier, but I knew you would try to prevent me. This is too significant to me." For a moment, I struggled to speak, my throat constricted with rage. "So that's it? You want me to accept a pregnancy that is not mine, to see you carry another man's child in our home, and you expect me to simply be okay with it?" Lisa placed her phone down, folding her arms. "You can call it whatever you like, but this is happening. Sarah and Kevin are relying on me, and if you truly love me, you'll respect my decision." An icy calm descended upon the room, edged over me, evoking more fear than outright anger. "You refuse to show respect, blindsiding your husband with decisions that impact our marriage. You aren't just making choices about your body, you're making choices about our family." Standing with clenched fists, she rebuked, "Stop playing the victim. Sarah is family too, and I'm trying to help her. If you can't see that, maybe I've overestimated you all these years." Her final words pushed me to a breaking point. "Overestimated me, Lisa? If you proceed, it will shatter us." She walked away with rigid shoulders, questioning our strength. As I stood there, consumed by rage, my heart raced. and I struggled to breathe. The revelation felt like a profound betrayal I couldn't define. The silent house weighed heavily on me, filled with the aftermath of her revelation, and I knew deep down that everything had changed. The following days were strained as Lisa tried to talk. She spoke of doctor's appointments, fertility meds, and implantation schedules with the ease of discussing grocery items rather than acknowledging the gravity of the life-altering surrogacy decision she had made. Each word she uttered seemed to further solidify the rift in our partnership. Just 2 evenings after revealing her plans, I returned home to discover a box from a fertility clinic in our refrigerator containing vials of medication syringes and detailed instructions strewn across the kitchen table. Lisa, engrossed in a thick packet of papers, seemed unfazed by my shock. "What's all this?" I demanded, my gaze fixed on the assortment before me. Glancing up, she explained matter-of-factly, "Hormone treatments. I need to prepare my body for the embryo transfer." I gaped at her in disbelief, unable to comprehend her unilateral decision-making. "You didn't think we should discuss this?" I challenged. With a nonchalant shrug, she responded, "I already told you we're past conversations." I'm moving forward. My voice quivered with restrained emotion as I pleaded, "You're disregarding my feelings. You're pushing me aside. Do you really think I'm leaving you?" "Do you?" she asked, rolling her eyes. "Stop being so dramatic. It's just 9 months, and then I'll hand the baby over to Sarah. I'm not replacing our children with another one. I'm just trying to help my sister," I muttered. "You can try to justify it all you want. But if you go through with this, I'm telling you now, I won't stay in this marriage," she said, her gaze firm. "Grant, you're free to leave if your pride can't handle my decision." My face flushed with embarrassment. "Pride? This isn't about pride. It's about us being partners. You blindsided me completely." "Talk about it with Kevin," she suggested. "And what if I do talk to Kevin?" she demanded, her voice rising. "He's the father of the embryo. He should be part of this discussion." I let out a bitter laugh. "And I'm the husband you made vows to. Or does that not matter anymore?" She picked up the papers, dismissing me. "We're finished here, Grant." I stood there feeling a pain in my chest. She couldn't even see the harm she was causing. My fingers tingled with the desire to tear up the fertility papers. I could feel the anger swell within me as I watched Lisa's hands busily engaged in her new project, tempting me to rip them apart. However, the fear of appearing irrational forced me to hold back. With a deep breath, I turned away, leaving her to her task, and made a silent decision as I lay awake that night. If Lisa was determined to pursue this path on her own, then I would initiate divorce proceedings. The thought of witnessing her pregnancy with Kevin's child was unbearable to me. When Lisa discovered my actions and confronted me with fury in the living room, while I was helping our eldest child with homework, I urged her to lower her voice to avoid upsetting our child. Taking her aside, I explained that I had warned her of the consequences of proceeding without me, and now I felt ignored and disrespected. The tension between us hung heavy in the air as she looked at me with anger and disbelief. Tears of anger filled her eyes as she pleaded with Grant to understand. "Grant, we can work through this. You just need to acknowledge that I am doing what I believe is right, and then we can move forward together." Raising a hand to stop her, Grant shook his head. "No, you're not listening to me. There's no easy fix for this. You made decisions without consulting me, using our money for a surrogacy as if our marriage was less important than your sister's needs. Did you really think I would just be okay with that?" Her trembling lips tried to form a response. "I never thought it would come to this, to talk of divorce," she whispered, hurt evident in her voice. Grant let out a bitter laugh. "Maybe I seem cold now. But I wasn't cold when you made that choice. That's what changed me." Before she could reply, she turned abruptly and stormed upstairs, too angry to speak further. Grant remained standing, his heart racing, wishing he could wake up from this nightmare. In their state, a 1-year separation was required before finalizing a divorce, and during that time they would have to coexist under the same roof. Lisa was well aware of this, and the thought of facing a year of strained proximity weighed heavily on both of them. Refusing to leave, she claimed she had nowhere else to go, needed rest, and believed the kids deserved a stable home. Reluctant to uproot my children, I allowed her to stay, though tolerate was a generous term. She occupied the guest room or the living room couch while I retreated to the master bedroom. We coexisted like strangers, barely communicating. The children noticed our distance, and questioned why we no longer sat together at dinner. Attempting to maintain civility in front of them, tension permeated every corner of the house. One weekend, Lisa's twin sister Sarah arrived with Kevin unexpectedly. They made themselves at home reviewing baby strollers and a catalog. With the children playing outside, I had no reason to fake politeness. Kevin stood from my recliner greeting me awkwardly. "Grant, hey," he said. "We were just, planning for the baby." Lisa caressed her growing belly as Kevin trailed off. "Kevin and Sarah want to make sure we're prepared. I need certain things in the house to be comfortable." I stared at her. Why can't Kevin buy all that for his own home, since that's where the baby will eventually live? Kevin let out an uneasy chuckle. "Oh well, we thought it'd be good to have supplies here for while Lisa's carrying." I cut him off. "Don't you dare talk about supplies in my house like it's your personal baby lounge." Lisa's cheeks flushed. "You're being unreasonable. Do you expect me to stand for hours in their place if I'm nauseated or if I need rest? I live here, Grant." I clenched my jaw. "Yes, you do, but maybe Kevin and Sarah should show some respect for me and not treat this house like their baby planning HQ." Kevin glanced at Sarah, who stood behind the couch, arms folded. Sarah gave me a steely look. "Grant, it's not like we enjoy being here," she said. "We're just trying to make this as painless for Lisa as possible." My anger flared hot. "Let me guess, you expect me to go along with it, maybe rub Lisa's feet?" Supporting her pregnancy cravings for a baby that wasn't mine, Sarah threw up her hands in frustration. "For God's sake, we're family. This shouldn't be about mine or yours. It's about helping each other," I said, narrowing my eyes. Kevin let out an exasperated sigh. "It stopped being about family when you two roped Lisa into this behind my back," I snapped. Kevin acknowledged. "Look, man, I get that this is awkward." "Awkward doesn't even cover it," I retorted. "But if you're so concerned about Lisa, then set up a comfortable space in your house, buy every item from that catalog. Just don't do it here. If you keep showing up unannounced, we're going to have a serious problem." Lisa stood radiating with indignation. "You can't ban them from the house." "This is my home too," she exclaimed. I turned on her, saying, "Maybe you should have thought about that before deciding to share your pregnancy with them, and not your husband." We stood there glaring until Sarah grabbed Kevin's arm and said, her voice shaking with anger, "Let's go. We don't need this." They hurried out of the room. Lisa whipped around, pointing the finger at me. Behaving childishly, I was aware that my actions were creating distance between our children's aunt and uncle. I didn't care. I preferred pushing them away than allowing them to disregard the importance of my marriage. She stormed off in a fit of anger, leaving me consumed by the familiar feeling of rage in my stomach. The following months were marked by a dreary routine. Lisa experienced pregnancy symptoms like nausea, backaches, and fatigue. She expected me to cater to her every need, requesting things like snacks from the kitchen or a pillow for her back. Every time I refused, she accused me of being heartless for not helping the mother of my children in her suffering. I retorted, suggesting she turn to Kevin or Sarah for assistance, as I was preoccupied with our kids and household duties. Despite her tears and accusations of my coldness, my heart remained unmoved. I reminded myself of her. Dee's lack of consideration was evident when she made the decision to carry someone else's child without even discussing it with me. In turn, I showed her the same lack of courtesy. One night, she came to my door seeking comfort, claiming she couldn't sleep due to leg cramps, and asking for a massage like I used to give her when she was pregnant with our twins. I stood at the doorway faced with her desperate expression and coldly replied no before shutting the door in her face. The tension between us did not go unnoticed by our children. Our oldest questioned why I no longer showed affection towards their mother. I explained gently that sometimes adults don't always see eye to eye, but reassured them of my love and presence. Despite my desire to blame Kevin and Sarah for our predicament, I held resentment towards Dee for allowing it to occur. As time passed, Dee's family became involved, with her mother reaching out to me with a judgmental tone, criticizing my supposed selfishness. "Such a wonderful, selfless act for her sister," I said coldly. "How can you deny her your support? Perhaps you should ask your daughter why she did it without informing me. I don't owe her any support, as that baby is not mine." Her father attempted intimidation, growling over the phone, "Young man, you are heading down a very dark path. If you don't assist Lisa, we will ensure you regret it." I couldn't help but smirk at the phone, although he couldn't see me. That's interesting because I already regret trusting your daughter with my marriage. Good luck with your threats, I replied before they hung up on me. I was aware that the whole extended family probably saw me as a monster, but I was also certain that the court would look at the facts. Lisa was carrying someone else's child supported in part by our shared finances without my approval. That responsibility would fall on her. One of the most difficult confrontations arose in the 7th month. Lisa, with her large and heavy belly, came home one evening with grocery bags, struggling to carry them, and almost dropping one on the porch. She called out, "Grant, could you please help me? My back is..." Standing in front of the door, arms folded, I was confronted with a difficult conversation that I wasn't prepared for. "Ask Kevin or Sarah," I said bluntly, knowing they held the key to the situation. The news of her pregnancy weighed heavily in the air, evident in the glistening of tears in her eyes, yet I sensed an underlying anger simmering within her. Exhausted from a long day dealing with hospital checkups, I reminded her, "I'm still your wife, regardless of how you feel about it." Despite her emotional outburst, I remained unmoved, as she struggled to bring the groceries inside, unintentionally bruising her forearm in the process. Finally, she confronted me, her frustration evident in her words. "You can't keep treating me this way," she exclaimed. I met her gaze with a raised eyebrow, refusing to play the role of the supportive husband she had discarded. Tears streaming down her face, she placed a hand on her belly, a poignant reminder of what was at stake. In a moment of callousness, I made a careless remark, causing her to predict a future filled with regret. As she spoke of the impending birth of our child, I chuckled dryly, knowing that our paths were soon to diverge. "LD will no longer be a part of our lives," she gasped sharply, as if shocked, then marched off into the guest room, leaving me in a house that suddenly felt unnaturally quiet despite the recent turmoil. As I let out a sigh, I questioned whether I had overstepped a boundary. However, any sympathy I felt for her quickly dissipated as I reminded myself that she had unilaterally made a decision that disregarded our marriage. My anger remained steadfast when Lisa unexpectedly went into labor during the 7th month, just after midnight. I heard her cries of pain in the hallway, followed by urgent knocking on my bedroom door. "Grant," she called out, her voice shaking. "My water broke, the contractions are coming. Please help me." I opened the door to find her in agony, her hands pressed against her swollen belly, her hair damp with sweat. For a moment, memories of supporting her during the labor of our own children flashed before me. But bitterness quickly washed over me. "I'm not taking you to the hospital," I said icily. "That's Kevin's responsibility." Her eyes widened in disbelief. "Kevin isn't a..." Sarah's phone went straight to voicemail as I rushed to get to the hospital. With another contraction ripping through her, she pleaded for help while gripping the doorframe. Ignoring her plea, I locked eyes with her and coldly walked away, leaving her to call for an ambulance on her own. As paramedics arrived and whisked her away, I tried to suppress any guilt that surfaced, reminding myself that the child wasn't mine. The next morning, angry voicemails from Lisa's mother flooded my phone, accusing me of abandoning her during labor. I deleted them all without hesitation. Upon hearing more of the story, her true intention became clear. She wanted to have a baby for her sister and rely on her sister's family for support. Lisa and the baby spent several days in the hospital. The baby girl, though premature, was stable. Sarah was dealing with her own health issues, leaving Kevin to juggle between 2 hospital rooms. Meanwhile, I carried on with my usual routine, taking the kids to school, going to work, and preparing dinner. When Lisa's mother called to inform me that Lisa would be returning home in a couple of days, I simply responded, "That's her decision," before ending the call. It was while I was reading in the living room that Lisa finally arrived. She appeared pale, exhausted, and was carrying the newborn in a portable car seat. After setting the seat down, she let out a long sigh and collapsed onto the couch. The baby stirred, emitting a gentle cry as I stared at this innocent infant, a stark reminder of the surrogacy that had shattered my marriage. With a clipped voice, I questioned, "Why have you brought the baby here? Shouldn't she be with Sarah?" Lisa closed her eyes, explaining that Sarah was still in the hospital recovering from complications. Sighing, Kevin was overwhelmed. "They asked me to keep the baby here for a few weeks," I scoffed. "They asked, were you volunteered?" She glared. "Is there a difference? I can't abandon her. She's helpless." "You should have thought about that before you decided to be a surrogate," I said. "But let me be clear, I'm not lifting a finger. If you're too tired to handle the crying, that's your problem. She rubbed her forehead, a tear slipping down her cheek. Have you always been this cruel, or did I push you into it? She whispered, seeming more like she was talking to herself than to me. That's a question you can ask yourself at night when the baby's screaming, I replied. Now if you'll excuse me, I have real children to feed. She flinched as though I'd slapped her, but said nothing while I walked away to start dinner. For the next month, the nights were filled with the infant's wails. Lisa would shuffle around half awake trying to warm bottles. She'd come to me, circles under her eyes, and beg for help. Every time I refused. Please, she said one night. Tears trickled down onto the bottle in her hands as she desperately longed for a half-hour's respite. The baby's persistent cries had been ringing through the house for what felt like an eternity. I met her gaze steadily urging her to reach out to Kevin or her mother for help. With a frustrated sob, she turned away, leaving the baby's cries to reverberate down the hallway. A pang of pity for the child tugged at me. It was innocent in all of this, a casualty of Lisa's choices, not mine. I couldn't allow her to shirk her responsibilities. With regular visits from Lisa's parents, I was subjected to their accusations and insults, branding me as a monster, a coward, and inadequate husband. On occasion, Lisa's father would confront me in the kitchen, lecturing me on my supposed failures. You should be ashamed, he'd scold, emphasizing that Lisa was in the throes of postpartum and required rest. Yet I would meet his reproachful gaze firm in my stance that she should have respected my boundaries. Let Kevin and her family take charge of the situation. It wasn't my child nor my dilemma. He would storm away, muttering curses under his breath, yet I remained resolute in the face of their relentless condemnation. Lisa's kin believed me heartless, but I stood strong, finding a grim sense of vindication amidst the ceaseless judgment. My lawyer supported me throughout the divorce proceedings, particularly when finances became a key issue. The process progressed slowly but steadily. Evidence was presented showing that Lisa had used funds from our joint accounts without my consent for surrogacy-related expenses, even resorting to forging my signature at times. The court documents detailed Lisa's deception, her disregard for my objections, and her unauthorized use of marital funds. The judge viewed the act of forgery harshly. In contrast, Lisa's attempt to portray me as a heartless individual who abandoned his pregnant wife held little weight, since the child was not biologically mine and her surrogacy plans had been concealed from me. Interestingly, Lisa's twin sister and Kevin remained silent on the financial matters, seemingly relieved that they were not held accountable for any financial discrepancies. Their main concern was gaining custody of the baby, but due to Sarah's health issues and Kevin's unstable job situation, they were unable to assume full custody immediately. The situation with the baby in our household became increasingly complex. The tense-filled arrangement that everyone hated but had to endure. By the time we reached the final hearing, Lisa had physically recovered, but was frazzled caring for a baby that wasn't hers to keep. She cornered me in the living room 2 weeks before the court date, the baby dozing in a bassinet. I need some financial help, she said bluntly. I looked up from my laptop and asked for what. She hesitated, then folded her arms. My doctor says I should be focusing on postpartum recovery. I shouldn't have to find a job immediately, she explained. I raised an eyebrow and replied, "You're not my responsibility anymore, Lisa." Her mouth tightened, and she retorted, "I'm still the mother of your 3 children. I'm not talking about money for the surrogacy. I mean money for me to live, to feed our kids when they're with me, to pay for my share of the expenses." I closed my laptop slowly and stated, "When we're divorced, I'll pay child support for our children as required by law. I'm not giving you spousal support." Her eyes flashed, and she argued I deserve some financial security. "Said my body, my comfort for your sister," I interrupted. "Not for me, that's the difference." Her voice trembled. "You're unbelievably cruel. You don't care that I'm struggling with postpartum depression." I stared at her. "I care about our children, not about the baby that's biologically Kevin's or your postpartum that you invited. You made this bed, Lisa, lie in it." She pressed her lips together, tears welling up. "You'll regret it," she said, her voice shaking with rage and sorrow. I shook my head. "You said that before. The only regret here is that we're in this mess at all." She swallowed, glancing at the baby. "Granted, it hurts me to say this, but you're not the man I remember." I gave a bleak laugh. "Nor are you the woman I married. Life changes Lisa. She marched away, leaving me with the quiet. The baby slept on, oblivious to the war zone around it. The final week before the court date, Lisa decided to move out, taking the baby to her mother's house until Sarah was healthy enough to assume custody. Our children, confused, asked if Mom was leaving for good. She tried to reassure them that she'd see them often, that she still loved them. They nodded, though sadness weighed on their little faces. The day she left, she stood in the foyer, the baby carrier at her feet, a small suitcase in her hand. She looked at me, eyes rimmed red, one last time. "Grant, I'm asking you not to do this. Don't finalize the divorce. I'll find a way to fix things, please." I felt a strange tug in my chest, but I let it pass. Fix things by turning back time, because that's the only way. You can't undo what you did. A tear rolled down her cheek. "I never imagined I'd lose you. I just wanted to help Sarah." I nodded bitterly. "Well, you helped Sarah, and in the process you torched our marriage. Goodbye, Lisa." She swallowed hard, picked up the baby carrier, and left, the door shutting behind her with a soft click that seemed to reverberate through the empty house. Taking my first shaky breath, I felt a wave of relief wash over me as we neared the final court date. Lisa was seated at one table with her lawyer, while I sat at another with mine. Kevin and Sarah looked on from the gallery, their expressions mirroring their apprehension. The judge, a stern-faced woman who had thoroughly reviewed all the documents, presided over the proceedings. Lisa's lawyer delivered an emotional speech, painting her as a victim of abandonment during pregnancy and me as an emotionally abusive partner. In response, my lawyer presented a detailed timeline, highlighting how Lisa had made the decision for surrogacy, without my consent, utilized marital funds for the procedure, and falsified my signature. I had made my refusal clear and set boundaries which she had repeatedly crossed. When the judge spoke, her tone was firm and decisive. She deemed Lisa's actions a flagrant disregard for our marital partnership, and acknowledged that the baby was not biologically mine, relieving me of any financial or parental obligations towards spousal support. Given these facts, she saw no justification for me to pay, particularly considering Lisa's actions. After uncovering Lisa's misuses of funds, the judge also awarded me primary custody of our 3 children. Lisa received visitation rights provided she could prove a stable environment. Lastly, she was ordered to repay part of the misused marital funds. As the judge delivered her ruling, Lisa's face crumpled, tears slipped down her cheeks. She covered her mouth with one hand, shoulders shaking. Kevin and Sarah exchanged stricken looks. I felt my own heart sinking, but mostly I felt vindicated. My revenge was complete. I had walked away from the wife who betrayed me, and the law backed me. We stepped into the hallway outside the courtroom. Lisa approached, eyes swollen. "Grant," she whispered, her voice trembling. "I never wanted it to come to this. I'm sorry, I truly am. I made a mistake, but I never thought you'd cut me off like this." I gazed at her, remembering the nights I'd pleaded with her not to do it, her dismissive retorts, her arrogance. "You decided to put Kevin and Sarah's needs before ours, and you lied about it. That's more than a mistake. It destroyed us," she said, letting out a ragged breath. "I just wish you could forgive me someday." My stare remained cold. "You forged my signature. You refused to listen when I begged you not to do this. Forgiveness doesn't come that cheap. Goodbye, Lisa." Sarah stepped closer, trying to place a hand on my arm. "Grant, don't you see? She's remorseful. She did it for me." I jerked my arm away. "You got what you wanted, Sar. That baby is yours now. You can deal with the fallout. You and Kevin can support Lisa if you think she deserves it. I'm done." They stood there speechless as I headed for the exit. The corridor felt brighter as I walked away, as if a crushing weight had been lifted. In the weeks after the final decree, Lisa moved in with her mother, the baby still with her until Sarah fully recovered. Whenever I saw Lisa during custody exchanges of our 3 kids, she looked frail, regretful. She asked how the children were doing, and I'd answer politely but kept my distance. She cast forlorn glances at me, as if expecting something more. Despite the community's belief that Kevin and Sarah were struggling financially, they managed to take on the responsibility of raising their baby. Kevin's work hours had been reduced and Sarah's medical expenses were mounting. Lisa, meanwhile, faced challenges finding a stable job due to her financial strain. On the other hand, my own children were faring well. With the tension dissipated in our home, we settled into a peaceful routine of school days, weekend outings, and family movie nights. Gone were the nights disturbed by a crying baby and the hidden conflicts in the hallways. Lisa would occasionally reach out to me expressing regrets about the circumstances with Kevin and Sarah. She acknowledged the unforeseen challenges of Kevin's unreliability and Sarah's health issues. She admitted that being the surrogate had only added more chaos. My responses to her messages were brief and focused on our children's well-being. One day, as my eldest child played with Legos, they inquired if I still loved their mother. I knelt beside them and paused, expressing that I care for her, because she is their mother, but as the adults in my life changed and betrayed trust, they seemed to simply move on, immersing themselves in their own world. Meanwhile, children, with their directness and lack of hidden motives, continued to amaze me with their authenticity. With time passing, the divorce became a distant memory, and I finally began to feel liberated. I held on to the house, a steady job, and primary custody of the children. Lisa's presence in the kids' lives became sporadic as she struggled to find her place. Kevin and Sarah welcomed the new baby, but their reality was far from a fairy tale, dealing with medical expenses, financial disagreements, and lack of time to support Lisa. She turned to her parents for assistance, but their help had limits. When people questioned why I didn't step in to aid her post-birth, when she was clearly overwhelmed, I explained that she had made choices that excluded me and she now had to face the consequences. Some saw me as heartless, but I believe that respect and honesty are non-negotiable in a relationship, qualities she had failed to uphold. My revenge wasn't about violence or public humiliation. It was about letting her face every single ramification of her choice alone. I withdrew the support she had taken for granted and let her see how stark the world could be when she neglected her husband's trust. The judge saw it my way, and so did life's harsh reality. If you ask me now whether I regret how merciless I was, I'll say no. Lisa dealt the first blow by betraying me. I responded in kind by giving her exactly what she asked for. Autonomy, no shared finances, no emotional support, no illusions that we'd stay married through a pregnancy I never consented to. In the end, I got my freedom and my children, while she was left to grapple with the selfless act that shattered our marriage. That's the story of how surrogacy for her sister turned Lisa from my beloved wife into a stranger, and how I found my satisfaction in not saving her from her own choices. If that's cruel, then cruelty was the price of my dignity, and it was a price I was more than willing to pay. I am more than happy to make the payment.